A little backstory on me. I was born in 1991 into a Christian family. Both my parents were very devout Christians. And the first time I met Jesus I was 5 years old, and it was on a Sunday night. And we were actually at Pastor Pat's church there in Holmes. And he preached the message was on heaven and hell. And being 5 years old, I didn't understand a lot of it, but I caught enough of it that it kind of made me curious. So that night on the way home, I asked my dad, I said, how do I get to heaven? And I was one of 6 boys and 5 girls, so it's kind of a chaotic car ride. My little brother was crying, and Dad said, just hang on a minute, we'll talk when we get home. So later on that evening, my dad come and got me and took me into him and my mother's room, and he laid out the plan of salvation, explained to me that I was born a sinner, and the only way I was going to go to heaven was to ask him to come into my heart and confess my sins and give my life to him. So I knelt there and said my prayer, and fast forward a couple of years, my dad was always my hero. I looked up to him for everything. And I've heard my dad 100 times say, good job, I'm proud of you, good work today, or, very encouraging. But I remember the first time I let him down, and that was just branded on me forever. I was 6 or 7 years old, and we were at a wrestling meet, and we had wrestled our first 2 matches, and I'd won them. We got to the end, and the kid I had to wrestle was a pretty good friend of mine, and our dads were pretty good friends. So I had wrestled this kid before and beat him every time I'd wrestled him, so I kind of went into it a little bit cocky and didn't really sweat the kid that bad. Well, we get out there, and from the last time I had wrestled this kid, he had improved tremendously. He caught me way off guard, and before I knew it, I was tied in a knot, and the referee slapped the mat and said, pinned. And this was the first time I'd ever been pinned, and I was just like, whoa, what just happened? I look over at my dad, and he's just standing there shaking his head, and I walk up to him, and he said, you did not lose that match, you quit. And I remember the rest of that day, Dad didn't have much to say to me, but that was kind of where I learned to never quit, never give up. And I understand where my dad was coming from. I have a 9-year-old son myself. I don't want him to grow up to be a quitter. But just with that day, from then on in sports, every aspect of my life, I was kind of a grit my teeth, get through it kind of guy. And fast forward down, at high school, this attitude, the refuse to lose, grit your teeth served me well playing high school football and rodeo and all this other, all the other activities. And then when I got out of high school, I moved out west and was working in a big feed yard out there. And that was kind of the first time being out of my parents' house and out on my own, and wasn't living for Christ at all. I didn't get in any trouble, but the guys I ran with were, less than perfect. And I started drinking just, to fit in, kind of hang out with my buddies and have fun. It's just what you did at the rodeos. And on the weekend, that's what you did. Didn't see, I was raised that it was wrong, but I didn't see the harm in it. So that's kind of where it all started. A few years down the road, I'd move back home. I get married to my wife, Lauren, and still continued on the weekends or when I was fishing or hunting, drinking with my buddies and just having fun. But then about 4 years ago, I was involved in an accident. It was a cattle-related accident at work. I broke both my hips and got banged up pretty good. And that being, I had to have somebody do everything for me. So that whole grit my teeth and get through it was gone. I had to rely on somebody for everything I did. So I kind of sank into a depression. I just didn't really know how to act. I didn't know how to let people help me, let people do everything for me. And on top of it, I was in a lot of pain. So I started just drinking every day. I didn't have nothing else to do. I drank. So I was down for about 4.5 months with the broken hips, and by being down, like I said, I woke up and I drank. That was about all I did. A year later, I'm starting to get better, back on my feet, kind of working my way back into going to work. And I get to where I'm going to work every day, but the drinking didn't slow down. I was like, man, this ain't good for me. I need to cut this out. And I just kept right on going. I'd started every single day. I'd start with 3 shots of whiskey and then head out the door and continue all day long. That went on for about 2 years, and I knew it bothered my wife. She understood that my hips bothered me some, and it was kind of a stressful job that I worked, where they kind of looked past drinking. It wasn't a great place for somebody that was an alcoholic to work, because if you could do your job and were good at it, they just looked the other way. And so that went on for a couple of years, like I said, and then I was saddling my horse. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning one day, and I started throwing up blood uncontrollably, and it scared the heck out of me. I just never had that happen before. With the whole episode of being in and out of the hospital with my hips and all that, I didn't want to go to the hospital. I didn't tell my wife. I just kind of kept it hid for a week or two, and it started being like an everyday thing. I'd start throwing up blood and feeling real sick, and so I decided it was another Friday morning. I was just like, all right, I'm done. I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm not going to chew tobacco anymore. That's it. That was, like I said, a Friday morning. Saturday at lunchtime, it was about 36 hours later, I was at a family function standing in line to get my food, and it was like somebody just shut the lights out on me. And when I came back to, there's people all huddled around me, and I was still kind of in and out, real fuzzy, wasn't thinking right. And I go to the hospital, and what had happened is, being without alcohol and without chewing tobacco, just cutting it off cold turkey, I had a seizure. And so that landed me in the hospital for a couple days, and was having some withdrawals. And as I was sitting there in the hospital room, just sitting there by myself, the doctor came in, and he says, "Christian, I got to have a real serious conversation with you." I was like, okay. And he closed the door behind him. And he said, "We've got some of your test results back. We've looked at them multiple times, and he said, you're 31 years old, and you will not live to see 35. And I said, whoa, this is more serious than I thought. He said, you have to quit drinking, and you have to change your diet. You have to take care of yourself. And he said, even then, he said, the damage is done. You have poisoned your body every day for years. He said, it doesn't look good. He said, we're going to take steps towards getting you better, but we'll see how it goes. Well, that totally caught me off guard. I figured I just had a little stomach ulcer or something, nothing too serious. And so I spent a few more days in the hospital and got kind of cleaned out, and then went back home with this refuse to lose attitude. I'm not going to drink again. I can do it on my own. I don't need help, because Dad had been after me to get help, and like CJ said, we had went and talked to, me and Dad had went and talked to him and Ben, and it was kind of throwing me curveballs, because growing up, my dad always told me, no, if you grit your teeth, you can get through it, where there's a will, there's a way, and now he's telling me I need to get help, and I was sick and not feeling good, and everything was just kind of a big mess, and so I went at it by myself for about 8 weeks. I did pretty good. Didn't have anything to drink, didn't chew, and was feeling pretty good. And then I believed that lie that Satan tells us, that you can probably drink just one and be okay. Just drink one and that's it. Well, I drank one, and the next thing I know, it's 3 weeks later, and I'm drinking whiskey in the morning again, right, going back down the same road I had been. And I was driving home from work, and I had been praying to God to help me to quit drinking. I was just take the urge away. I want to be here to raise my kids. I want to, be a good husband to my wife. And I had been praying this for months, and he hadn't made it any easier in my head. And so I was driving home, and I thought, well, I guess this is my story. This is what God, when I was born, Christian was going to die before he was 35 as an alcoholic. That was my story. And I threw my hands up, and I gave up. I got about half a mile from my house and got pulled over. And they pulled me over for window tint on my pickup. And the officer said, "You've been drinking." And I said, "Oh, a little bit." She did some tests, and I passed her test. She said, "Would you blow in this just to kind of see where you're at?" And like a dummy, I did. And I blew way over the legal limit. And the officer said, "I don't know whether to take you to the hospital or to take you to jail." She said, "You have got a serious problem." So, like CJ said, I spent the night in jail, spent a few more days in the hospital, and then went to the refuge that following Monday. And I went into the refuge program just thinking I'll just grit my teeth and get through this. 6 months, I can do it, no problem. And I was really struggling. I love my wife and my kids more than anything, and being away from them was really hard, but I knew getting sober was going to be better for them. So I decided, I said, 6 months, here we go. I'm going to do it. I went through there writing down the Proverbs and doing the book work, and inside was mad as a hornet, but just checking the boxes, trying to keep CJ happy and keep him off my case. And we made it through the first month, and CJ and I, we took a drive. We had to go into town for something, and what he told me that day, I'll never forget, because it changed my life. He was kind of telling me his story, and he told me all the stuff he had been through, but he told me, he said, if God ever took my wife and kids from me, took all my family from me, he said, I would not run back to the drugs and alcohol. I would run to Jesus. And I thought, the only reason I want to get sober is for my wife and kids. If I didn't have them, I'd probably just drink the rest of my life away. And that finally a light bulb went off in my head that God wants me sober for my wife and kids, but that's not the only reason. He wants me sober for him, so I can serve him, so I can lead others to him, be a disciple, and point others to Christ. I fought with that a couple days, and then I finally was just like, okay, God, I prayed, and I had never surrendered 100% to God. I would say, here you go, God, you can have this situation, but just leave this over here alone, I surrendered everything to God 100%. If you take my family from me, I'll still serve you. If you take, the other important things in my life, I will still serve you. I remember praying that prayer and surrendering everything to God, and that battle that had gone on inside of me for years was gone. Just like a peace that I hadn't felt since I was a little kid. And since then, it's not just reading my Bible to check the box and say I read my Bible. It's not going to church so Dad's not calling me saying, hey, why aren't you in church? It's a hunger for God's word. It's a hunger to serve him. So the next 4 months, I'm not going to say they were easy at the refuge, but we got through it, and I graduated. And since then, kind of up to date, I hit 2 years sober, November 5th. And thank you. About a month after I got home, my wife and I joined our church there, Grace Baptist, there in Sheraton, Iowa. My wife, she serves as a pianist in the church. She teaches the Wednesday night junior high girls choir. She's also started a Bible study called She Serves, and it started off just being praying. She'd have one or two ladies show up, and the other night I got home from the tree stand, and I pull in my driveway and there's 14 vehicles and about 16 ladies sitting around the campfire in my backyard. So she has done very well with that, and I'm so proud of her for that. I serve on the security team at church and just fill in where I'm needed, helping out with teaching the boys classes and just kind of whatever they need. So I think the Redeemer Church, CJ and Ben, Michael, John, Chad, I can't thank you guys enough. You guys came alongside me and helped me when I was refusing help. It takes a lot for someone to step in and help somebody that does not want help, and they didn't give up. So, thank you.